Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I'll be analysing and reviewing games using the mindset of speedrunning. This video will look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people will first play the game. This will look like a condensed standard review. Next we'll discuss the speedrun experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. Finally, we'll look at the tool-assisted speedrun, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. If you already know the game and want to jump straight to the speedrun part, I've left timestamps in the description. Today we're looking at the Ninja for the Sega Master System. So this game was originally an arcade game, but it ported to the Master System, and it's a really excellent, pretty challenging game overall. Before we get stuck into it, if you end up enjoying this video, please consider subscribing to keep up to date. I'm hoping to continue making these videos, and subscriptions help out a lot. Okay, so this game is pretty much a standard sort of running around and shooting kind of game. You can hit enemies with your ninja stars and you're going to progress through a whole bunch of levels. So it seems like it's not going to have a whole lot of depth, but then under the hood it ends up being really intricate. So the first thing I want to talk about is controls. You got your standard controls where if you press the one button you'll throw a ninja star in whatever direction you're facing. But the really cool thing about it is if you press the other button on the controller, button 2, you'll actually just fire up, even if you're facing down. So the really cool thing is you can just run all the way around the level and keep firing up just by pressing button 2. But if you do want to hit an enemy in a particular direction, you can just fire in another direction by pressing the other button. The other thing that I didn't know until I was a lot older is that you can actually go invisible in this game by pressing both buttons at once. So it looks kind of like that, and what that does is it actually makes you invincible as well for a short period of time while you're invisible. After playing through the levels for a little while, you're going to come across scrolls, and the first one you'll see is the red scroll here. You'll immediately notice that it changes your ninja star to be quite a bit bigger. Now the only change here really is that it's going to go through multiple enemies at once, so you can shoot one star and then kill, let's say, all 3 of these enemies. It's a pretty good upgrade, so you don't need to keep spamming the shoot button. Now the red scroll doing that ninja star power up leads to one of the more interesting intricate parts of this game, and that's the hit ratio system. So normally when you beat a level, you're going to get a particular hit ratio. Like on this level I did 585 ninja star shots, and I hit 31 enemies in total with those, so it's a hit ratio of 5%, and I get a bonus of 1,000 points. Not too great. So what that leads you to do is play the game a little bit more carefully and only shoot when you actually want to shoot an enemy. You don't just keep firing randomly. If you do that, you're going to get a much better hit ratio, like 100%. And if you get 100%, you'll get 50,000 points, and you get extra lives for getting more points. So this is actually very worth doing, and this is how I played the game a lot growing up. Trying to get that 100% hit ratio on basically all the levels, and then stack up a whole bunch of extra lives. And it's a very good strategy for getting through the game, because it is an extremely difficult game. The other thing you might notice there is that I've got 28 shots and 31 hits. Cool thing about that is, when you shoot your upgraded ninja star and it goes through 2 enemies at once, that counts as 1 shot, but you get 2 hits. So my hit ratio there should actually be over 100%, although the game just displays 100% and gives you 50,000 points for it. But it gives you a bit more leeway for getting that 100% and the point bonus. Of course, if you just want to cheese this system really badly, you can just miss so many shots that you actually get a hit ratio of 0% once it rounds down. So if we do that, we can see that I've done 3,825 shots, 31 hits and 0% hit rate. The weird thing is, I'm not sure if it's a glitch or a feature, but you get a lot of bonus points. Like, what's that, 9 million bonus points, almost 10 million. And as a result, you get a whole bunch of extra lives for that. So if you do want an easy way to cheese the game, just miss a whole bunch of shots, like keep firing into a tree over and over and over and over, and then you'll eventually get this point bonus and have a whole bunch of extra lives. Although you might have to wait several minutes for it to count down. So the red scroll is pretty much the most interesting because it gives you that ninja star power up, but you can also get the blue scroll as well, and it stacks on top of the red scroll. The blue scroll just makes you move a little bit faster. And these scrolls are really cool. The only downside is it does play the you have a scroll music whenever you have a scroll. Think almost like using the bike in Pokemon, and you always hear the bike music. So you don't often hear the music that's actually for the levels in the game. You just hear the same song all the way through pretty much. And that's mainly because once you actually have a scroll, you pretty much just hold on to it until you die. And you always want to have a scroll because they're very good. So you'll keep progressing through the levels of the game, going through this same gameplay loop, so making sure you've got the scroll on you, killing enemies, and then coming to a boss at the end of the level. As I said before, it's an extremely difficult game. It's really fun to go through and try and 100% hit rate each level, and this level is really fun to do that on with these kind of dog animal sort of enemy things, because you can line them all up and then put one ninja star through a whole bunch of them. Very easy to get 100% on this one. The game also has this really cool level with the logs, and you've sort of got to avoid these ninjas throwing stars at you, and this is where that going invisible technique comes in really handy if there's a star coming straight for you. This level can be pretty tricky because you can't just run out of the way. The game does ramp up quite a bit in difficulty with the enemies who circle around you and shoot ninja stars at you, and just the sheer amount of enemies that can be on screen at any given time, even when you're trying to kill the boss of the level. So the general strategy for this game is to just kill enemies as they come up, otherwise if you try and just run past them they'll follow you and all of a sudden you'll have 10 or 15 chasing you at once. Now there's one more scroll that I haven't talked about yet, and that is the green scroll. First one comes from this enemy. You'll grab it and it'll seem to do nothing, but lying underneath this is one of the most intricate parts of the game. So if you just play the game normally and you get to the end of this level, the game will actually loop around on itself and it won't let you finish the game. It sort of just sends you back to an earlier level and says, try again. And the reason it does that is because you don't have all the green scrolls. So there are 5 green scrolls hidden throughout the game, and that first one is super easy to find, but the other 4 are definitely not. I have no idea how people would have found these scrolls in the 80s, but I never found them as a kid. It wasn't until I had Google and could look it up that I could actually find the scrolls. The next scroll that you get is in this level here, but it's not just out in the open or even with an enemy or anything. What you have to do is go up to this statue, go underneath the statue, and shoot it at multiple times from the bottom to spawn the green scroll. We'll see that here in one sec. There we go, shoot at the statue and the green scroll will just appear there. So it's fair to say you're not going to be able to beat this game without some sort of guide or something like that. The next scroll is equally cryptic. You sort of just have to stand on this tree here and it appears. So you really just have to know to do that. So I won't show where the other scrolls are just for spoiler reasons, but if you do want the best ending to this game, you will need to get all those scrolls. I kind of like it that it adds a bit of depth to the game and makes it a lot more interesting than just run to the end of each level, although it is a little bit frustrating that if you're playing this in the 80s, you wouldn't have been able to get that best ending. In fact, Sega actually acknowledged that these scrolls are too cryptic and put out a publication with some hints on where to find them, saying they goofed up by not telling you. So overall, I would really recommend this game casually. If you're going to play through it, I'd suggest don't use save states or anything like that. Now, normally I don't mind save states too much. I mean, I am a Tazzer after all. But this game in particular really benefits from the challenge side of the game, and that comes down to having a limited number of lives and everything. Make sure if you do play it, you Google where all the green scrolls are, because otherwise you'll just get to the end and have to redo a whole bunch of levels. But as I said, the challenge is the main attraction to this game. In fact, I remember that when I was a very early teenager and had just gotten a phone which had a very bad internet connection, one of my most treasured gaming memories was staying up till like 2 or 3 AM in the warm glow of my CRT, playing this game and getting through it. Just gradually mastering every level, getting one level further each time and sort of Googling where all those scrolls were supposed to be, and then eventually getting to the end. It was a very special gaming moment and really enjoyable. Just a heads up that the speedrunning section will unavoidably have some spoilers in it. I'll try and keep everything pretty much chronological, so the end of the game should fall towards the end of the speedrunning section. Okay, so this is what the speedrun leaderboard looks like for the Ninja. You can see there's a few runners all with pretty similar times in that 5-minute range, but really interestingly it's broken up between the US and JP run. We won't look too much at the Japanese run today, but essentially the Japanese version of the game has some different and extra levels, so that's why it's a little bit longer there. It's a bit weird, but a few Master System games do it, and I don't know why they didn't port the extra levels over to the US version, but there you go. We'll be looking at the US version today and Arnold's world record of 5:43. We can see Arnold starting off, and there's no like major huge glitches in this game. It is really just a speedrun going through, playing as intended, but very, very well. You might also notice Arnold is shooting randomly just more than he really has to, and the reason for that is to lower his hit ratio. So as we said before, the score counts down as you shoot more and more and hit less. So if he's got that ratio of 29%, he's only got that 5,800 point bonus to count down. But he doesn't just keep firing all the time, because the projectiles can cause lag, which ruins it, but you'll see he goes up to the rock here and fires a whole bunch into the rock there just to reduce that hit ratio. In level 1, he also avoids the red scroll, which would normally power up your ninja star, but he does get the blue scroll. The reason for avoiding the red scroll is just because the sprites for the other ninja star are a bit bigger, and they tend to cause more lag. Not to mention with the unupgraded ninja star, it goes away when you hit an enemy, so they leave screen sooner as well. We can see him continue throughout the game with some really good use of the invisibility power up, and also just hitting enemies as soon as they come on the screen, both to reduce lag and reduce danger. At the end of each level is a boss, and you have to have pretty good mashing skills to kill that boss quickly. The early bosses don't take much to kill, but they sort of get more difficult as you go. You also need really good mashing skills for when you rub up against like rocks and trees and shoot a whole bunch of ninja stars just to lower that hit ratio. I really can't stress enough how impressive some of this gameplay is. The way that Arnold is playing the game right now is very dangerous. Just letting enemies chase you like that is a recipe for disaster, because they end up catching up to you and then just circling around doing a whole bunch of damage. But given that he's able to keep moving and kill the boss very quickly, it's never really much of an issue for him. You can see that when he gets to the end of most levels, he will turn around and kill some enemies. It's a bit of a trade-off there. So the first reason to do that is because it's a bit safer to have less on screen, but also it reduces a bit of lag. Then the other side of the trade-off is because he's getting more total hits, that does increase the hit ratio and make that score counter take a little bit longer. I often find this really cool with the scroll here. The last green scroll sort of gives you instructions on how to access the secret area at the end. So that's exactly what Arnold is going to do on this little lantern thing here. Shoot 3 times and disappear 3 times, and that opens up the stairway to the last level of the game. Pretty cool little secret, and you have to do that to get the best ending. One thing that I should mention about the last level here is that normally when you kill enemies, they're gone forever, but in this level when you kill enemies, they can come back. So you have to be really careful and just sort of run through as best you can. This one's definitely the hardest level for that reason. The other sort of scary thing about this level is you can go down dead-end paths. You can see there's usually 3 paths, and only one of the 3 of those paths is the right way to go. So you have to be very careful here. And that's pretty much the game completed. No crazy glitches or anything like this, just a really solid run, very good knowledge of the game, and very skilled gameplay given how difficult it is. So a very impressive world record here. I'd recommend picking this up either casually or as a speed game, although if you're going to speedrun it, you'll need to be pretty good at mashing. So the TAS we're looking at today is the 516 TAS by Isotage, submitted back in 2016. Although Isotage actually started working on this game in 2012, so this TAS was basically a 4-year work in progress, and it's incredibly well optimized. So part of the reason that it took Isotage so long to make the TAS is due to the tools which were available at the time. So when he started work on this in 2012, BizHawk did have a very early version of something called TAS Studio, but it wasn't particularly well up and running yet, so it wasn't really able to be used. More often than not, the way people made TASs in 2012 was essentially by slowing down the game, so they're playing it frame by frame, and pressing the buttons they need to press, and if they need to change something, reloading a save state. Imagine if you played a game casually with save states before, it's like that, but on a very, very finely detailed level. Now, a lot of very good TASs were made this way, but TAS Studio was a big innovation to have TASs be a bit more optimized than they were before. So if you're going to TAS the Ninja in TAS Studio, it'll look something like this. And essentially, if you want to move up, you'll press the up button there, and you can see now you've pressed up. If you wanted to shoot, you would press the 1 button, or if you want to do the other shot, you would press the 2 button. Maybe if you wanted to move right instead, you would move right. And you can imagine just testing lots of different things, and that's sort of how you go about making a TAS these days. Isotage saw that this tool was sort of starting to be developed and was very much in awe of this tool at the time. Unfortunately, he couldn't use it. Now, what Isotage ended up doing was actually opening up the TAS file sort of under the hood. Now, if you open up a TAS file, what it looks like inside the file is a document, and it's got a list of the button presses. Essentially, this document looks pretty much the same as what TAS Studio looks like, although you have to remember TAS Studio didn't really work at the time properly. So what Isotage did was he opened up his document and he'd sketch out some movement, like a whole bunch of up button presses, kind of like what we've got in TAS Studio there. And if he wanted to do a shot on like this particular frame back up here, he would enter the shot there. And then maybe if he wanted to move down instead of up, he would move down instead of up like that, and sort of manually edit all this. Now obviously you can't see what's happening when you do that, so what you would then have to do is reload this TAS file in and play back the entire TAS up to whatever level he was doing, and then see what changes he made and like how they affected the game. And then if he wanted to shoot not on this frame but on the next frame, he'd then have to move it across, watch the entire TAS again, and then see what happened. I can't stress how absolutely insane this method was to do TASing, and how impressive it is that he was able to do a few levels using this. But as a result, the TAS ended up being very, very optimized, especially for the time, compared to the way that people were normally doing it, which was just by slowing down the game and playing it. As we're about to look at some of the TAS itself, I'll try and do it my best justice, but I'd highly encourage you to read through the submission text on TAS videos, as it's got lots of details. So you can see the TAS pretty much starting out here, and Isotage is doing a whole bunch of shots everywhere. Not shots all the time because it can cause lag, but in a TAS setting you know exactly when lag happens and when it doesn't. So Isotage is very carefully sketched it out to make sure he never gets lag from firing a shot, but he can fire as many shots as possible. And you get an 11% hit ratio, which is very low. And the shot spam takes a step up in level 2, which is an auto-scroller, because Isotage can just sit on the edge of the screen and fire bullets off it basically the whole time. The reason the edge of the screen is so powerful is because you can only have 3 bullets on screen at any one given time. So it makes sense to get them off screen as quick as possible so that you can fire more. Isotage actually got the hit ratio so low here that he had some time to do play around and do some cool stuff with firing shots stylistically. Now, as I said, he makes sure not to cause any lag frames from doing the shot spam, and the way that he achieved that was by TASing the entire level without shot spam, and then sort of reverse engineering it and working backwards through the level, adding in extra shots where he could, and then if he did lose any extra time, he wouldn't do the shot. So it's sort of like making a TAS in reverse, which is a really cool concept. The TAS actually does feature a glitch, so to speak. If you hold left and right on the controller at the same time and also hold the up button and then shoot, you'll get a weird shot. You'll see it here. It sort of comes out the side and goes up. So Isotage is able to fire straight up but without hitting the enemy straight above him. It's not particularly useful from a casual standpoint, but from a TASing standpoint it gives you a lot more options to play with, because rather than just having all the directions, you also have that extra thing where it comes out the side but goes straight up. And it's very important to note that RTA runners can't do that special left plus right shot because, well, they can't hold left and right on the controller at the same time. That's just the way that controllers are designed, to make sure that you can't do that. And generally anything with left plus right is usually allowed in TAS runs, but banned in RTA runs. Because in theory you could pull apart the controller and press down on the circuit board in real life and press left and right at the same time. That's sort of why it's allowed, but it's always a little bit controversial. The funny thing about left plus right on the Master System though is that there were some controllers released in Brazil by Tectoy that weren't the best designed controllers, and basically if you press down really hard on those controllers you can actually press left and right at the same time, just, you know, with your hands. So in some Master System games it is allowed to press left and right at the same time because those controllers exist, and in theory you could get one of those controllers and do it, so it's allowed. This game's a little bit different though. I find this level really cool because Isotage was able to leave a bullet sort of just hanging there, and it's a cool little bit of play around. It also kills enemies whenever they touch it. There's a bit of trade-off there in terms of potential lag, but he was able to do this without losing time. And Isotage comes through the last level and finishes off the Taz. I can't stress how impressive this Taz is in terms of optimization, and it's really cool to see how much work is being put into it. The hit ratio and shot spam stuff is really interesting, and it ends up being pretty technical. Although it's only about 10 or 20 seconds faster than RTA, those 10 or 20 seconds took a lot of effort to squeeze out, and it's definitely worth checking out the whole Taz and submission text. That's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and thanks so much for watching.